Hey, Beyond listeners, I am going to start a 3-part series regarding my infertility journey. I just got done writing part 1 and part 2, and there were tears. And I think it's important to recognize that I don't mind going to this space, but in order to really hit my message and make sure you, as the listener, knows exactly what I'm feeling to the best of my ability, I need to go to this vulnerable, deep space and dig up a lot of rawness. So bear with me if there are tears while I record this episode. Know that I'm okay. Know that the tears are good and it's okay. And I'm willing to go here for you. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode and gain insight about infertility. And know that no two infertility journeys are the same, but there are only so many descriptive words that we can use as infertility warriors. And those words are what unite us. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. You are listening to Beyond, and I'm your host, Dr. Flora. Listen, life is hard. You don't have to do it alone. As a mindset coach, physician, mom, and an infertility warrior, I have mastered techniques to help move you towards contentment and growth. I can't wait to go along with this crazy-ass life journey with you while making sure you feel like your best self. This podcast is meant to have you feel unstuck from your rut and less alone. Let's do this. I remember when I was diagnosed with infertility, and even though I worked in the field of medicine, I don't think I could have ever wrapped my head around and fully prepare myself for what this journey was going to entail. And furthermore, how this journey was going to change my career trajectory and change me inside and out. Now, mind you, at that time, I didn't have the coping strategies that I have now. I went through this infertility trip without boundaries, being a people pleaser, striving for perfection, and really going through life at that time with pain, guilt, shame, and envy. So let's start with part 1 of it all. So let's rewind way back when. It had been 2 years since I had given birth to our baby Gia, and little did I know at that time she was our miracle baby. Until this point, I had followed my life check boxes to the best of my ability. I studied really hard, eventually got grades after a few hiccups, decided to go to medical school after a couple of small detours. I happened to get into the same medical school as my then boyfriend, now husband. We worked really hard. We matched into training programs in Southern California, got engaged during the 4th year of our medical school. We got married after we graduated, quickly moved to Southern California, completed our training programs, bought a house, had a baby. Now, granted, this wasn't a straightforward path, but all of my check boxes for being a good Indian woman were being marked off. I was doing them. I wish I could describe to you the type of person I was back then. I lived and breathed by these check boxes. My entire self-worth and confidence was based off of these superficial check boxes that family, culture, society had set out for me. And quite frankly, I had set out for myself because of that. My fertility is something that I took for granted, like most of us do, because quite frankly, nobody really talked about infertility back then. And everyone was apparently popping out babies left and right according to when the official societal timeline told them it was the perfect time. So back then, my life check boxes involved very specific family planning goals. The perfect family included multiple children. They would be 3 years apart because 2 years would kill me, and 4 years just seemed way too far apart. I wanted two kids, maybe three if I wasn't too tired. And ideally, I wanted a mix of both genders, boy, girl. We'll be a wonderful family of four, perfectly happy. I'm literally like rolling my eyes right now because it sounds so silly. This sounds so silly to me because I don't even know that person right now. I don't even recognize her. Back then, my contentment was based off of those check boxes. And later I realized I don't have much control over that. But at that time, I was waiting to be happy. I'm going to say this again. I was waiting to be happy. I mean, of course, I was happy. I was with the love of my life. I had a beautiful baby little girl. I was in a job that was truly fulfilling at that time. But like my base foundation of contentment was not there. I had fleeting moments of pride and happiness that were just that. They were temporary. I would achieve a goal, I would mark off a box on my list, and then move on, waiting for my happily ever after. So, anyway, Gia was 2 at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, oh God, like it's already time. According to my checklist, I should probably start trying to conceive another because by the time the next baby's born, Gia and the sibling will be close to 3 years apart. And like that is what I wanted. And that was the next thing for my happily ever after. But then at that time, something in my gut just didn't feel right. I had just come out of my postpartum depression and I was finally getting the hang of this whole mom thing, like balancing my growing medical practice, getting the hang of being an attending doctor. I was getting in the swing of not being in training and being my own boss. I was finally getting the hang of like the schedule of getting a toddler ready, daycare drop off, going to work, daycare pickup, coordinating pickup, drop offs, everything that we needed to do. I was getting the hang of being the primary breadwinner because at that time, my husband was in a grueling interventional pediatric cardiology training program. I was finally getting back to working out. I was finally recognizing my body, myself. And then the thought of being pregnant again also really scared me. Now, I know no two pregnancies are the same, but my pregnancy with Gia was really tough. I had debilitating fatigue. I had nausea, vomiting for the first 6 months of my pregnancy. I actually lost weight instead of gaining weight. I went into preterm labor. I delivered a under 5 pound little alien baby who, thank God, is healthy and thriving. But I remember thinking to myself, do I want to do this all over again? So I remember turning to Sanjay and kind of going through all of these thoughts. And I told him, I don't know. I'm kind of happy right now. I don't know if I'm ready to go through this again, all over. And you're busier now more than ever. And I don't know if I can do this. And bless his heart. I mean, he is and continues to be the most supportive partner. And he was like, okay, whatever you want. But I also know at that time how badly we wanted a second child. So the plan was already there to conceive another, just not at this time. And so we moved our timeline slightly. And I started slowly adjusting my checklist. And mind you, this wasn't the first time that I adjusted those check boxes because in my gut, deep down, I had always adjusted them according to what my gut instinct was. I just happened to come back to that preset list because I wanted to be a really good Indian girl and I wanted to make sure society saw me that way. And don't get me wrong, I didn't do a lot just to please my parents. I did have a little bit of a rebellious side, but my own list ended up coinciding what was expected of me because it really did make me happy. For example, I started my freshman year of college, my first year of college, as a business major, just to spite my parents because they really wanted me to go into sciences. I eventually figured out that wasn't the path for me, and I ended up my freshman year with a 2.7 GPA and realized I can't get anywhere with this GPA. So, kind of delved into sciences, eventually switched my major to physiology, which I still love to this day. No regrets. My third year of college, I wasn't 100% sold that I wanted to be a doctor. So I did some overseas volunteer work. I actually stayed in undergrad for an extra year to complete my psychology major just to give myself some time to breathe. Now, back then, not graduating in 4 years and immediately moving to higher level of education was a big no-no. But this specific checkbox, when it came to my fertility, family planning, it really came down to me being ready. And I continued to adjust to the point where my husband and I decided to stop pursuing having more children. And the details on how we came to that decision will come in part 3 of this 3-part series. But the fact that we wanted a kid so badly at that time, I get emotional thinking about it. Not because we regret our decision, and it's not because I still want more children. Like, we're done. But I guess we're still grieving. Like, a part of me is so grateful that we went through that journey because I wouldn't be the person I am today if I didn't go through such a difficult, shitty couple of years. And I had mentioned at the beginning of this episode, there were so many tears. And I guess my tears are maybe empathy for this past person who deep down felt so lost and went through such hardship when most people around her were either conceiving naturally or growing their families, or while most people were going through IVF and successfully getting pregnant and having beautiful children. I guess these tears are just for being in that space where I was hurting deeply and still forcing myself to be happy. Like, forcing myself to be genuinely happy. It was such a weird time, and I kept pushing my pain so far down that I guess my tears are on the surface. My emotions are here because I deserved to feel sad, and I deserved to sit in my pain, and I deserved to grieve. And during that time, I didn't. So let's fast forward a year. This was after we decided to start conceiving or start trying to conceive. And we were trying for about 6 months, still no pregnancy. You know, my red flags went off, but I really never expected to be diagnosed with infertility. At this time, Sanjay was in the thick of his training, taking call, always running back to the hospital for emergencies. He was barely home. I was chronically stressed. But because I expected myself to be super mom, I thought this was just supposed to be how life was going to be from now on. So my red flags went off. I saw a fertility specialist. She ran some blood work. And before even the results were back, like at that same appointment, she sits me down in her office and says, I think you'll be okay. You're just 34 years old. You're a busy doctor mom, married to another busy doctor dad. Just, you know what? You two need to go out of town. You guys need to go take a trip, buy a bottle of wine, be together, and just take a break, and you'll come back pregnant. There is really no obvious reason why a 34-year-old perfectly healthy woman would have trouble getting pregnant. My people pleasing side was like, you're right. You're the doctor. I'm the patient. I believed her. And we did just that. And there was still no pregnancy. I knew deep down I just got dismissed as a patient. So I started searching for a second opinion. Now, this fertility doctor, who ended up being my fertility specialist throughout my journey, she said to me in her office at our very first appointment, "You're only 34, Flora. Why aren't you pregnant? Let's figure this out and get this going." And that's when I was diagnosed. Secondary infertility of unknown origin. That was my diagnosis. Secondary infertility is the inability to become pregnant or carry a pregnancy to term after previously conceiving naturally and giving birth without medical intervention. Let me tell you, that diagnosis, I felt devastated. I also was fearful because I really didn't know what that meant. And I can't explain the depth of my emotions because even though I was shaken to my core, I didn't let myself feel it. I almost ignored my gut instinct. And even though I did have a gut instinct, quite honestly, I don't even know if I would have listened to it or if I was as conscious of it because I was so dependent on that checklist of, I gotta have a second baby. So I simply followed what I was expected to do because God forbid I was the brown woman with only one kid. Oh my God. I needed to be a good mom, so I was obsessed with having another child. I needed to fulfill my wife and daughter duties, so I was obsessed with having another child. I needed to keep up with everyone else's big life plans or be ahead of everyone's life plans. So I was obsessed with having another child. I needed to get to my happily ever after point. So I was obsessed with having another child. So we moved forward with our doctor's recommendation and pursued in vitro fertilization, also known as IVF. IVF is when doctors assist in getting a woman pregnant. It gives nature just a little helping hand by bringing the sperm and the egg together outside the body and helping the embryo just get a head start. So, what they do is the doctor collects eggs from the woman, sperm from the man. They take a little petri dish and they mix it all together. And if the sperm successfully meets the egg, it gets fertilized. And then the lab grows this fertilized egg into a very early stage called an embryo. Now, once the embryo is tested and deemed healthy, it gets carefully placed back into the woman's uterus where it hopefully sticks and grows into a healthy baby. But before you get to all this, the doctors need the eggs and the doctor needs this. So before you get to all of this though, the doctors need your eggs, the doctor needs your partner's sperm. And as you can imagine, it's pretty easy to get sperm from a guy. But for us women, however, it requires a procedure called an egg retrieval. And in order for that to happen, you need a whole workup: blood draws, ultrasounds, medications. They need to get your ovaries overly plump and ready because they want to make sure They get as many eggs as possible to increase your chance of getting a healthy embryo. That takes a whole cycle of medications, injections, oral meds. I mean, it's just a meticulously timed schedule because they're trying to control as much as possible to increase your chances. And get this, not one step is a guaranteed success. So here I was in my world, where I was taught hard work, sacrifices will give you something in return. That is all I have known. And until this point, it has proven to be correct. Until my infertility experience, IVF did not follow this rule, or really any rule. It was a really difficult lesson for me to learn and relearn over and over again. I was spiraling because I felt so out of control. Here I was, this type A, firstborn, South Asian doctor mom. I was spiraling. I was so high on emotions and I was constantly on edge with anger, envy, frustration. I mean, I don't even have core memories of time with my family during that period of time. I do have core memories, however, of pain and regret and guilt until there was a turning point in my life where I decided to change. But before I get to that, I want to talk about this story. I still remember a situation where I was doing all the things through IVF. Things really just weren't working out. And a friend of mine got pregnant with her second child. She was so gracious, such a class act. She pulled me aside and was like, look, I don't want to be insensitive. I know what you're going through. And I am here for you. And I will continue to be here for you. But I think I would be doing you a disservice as a friend if I didn't tell you that I'm pregnant. I still remember where we were. We were outside my garage. Our husbands were in the vicinity. Our kids were playing. And it was just the two of us in that space. And my immediate reaction was pure joy. I remember I gave her the biggest hug because I knew how badly she wanted this second kid. I knew it was her calling. She wanted, like in her gut, in her heart of hearts, she wanted this kid. And then that joy, that high, immediately went to the pit of the pits of devastation for myself. It was such a weird roller coaster in a matter of seconds, you guys. And I remember feeling that roller coaster over and over and over again. Anytime I heard of someone's pregnancy news, anytime I would see it on social media, anytime my family would be like, oh, guess who's pregnant? I would go from that immediate high to just plummet, a plummeting emotion of low. And it got easier because I became numb to that aftermath plummet. Let's continue with that story. Let's fast forward multiple months. I had gone through 2 cycles at that time, both unsuccessful. And my fertility specialist did some extra tests. We changed some protocols. And after a transfer, we had a positive pregnancy test. I still remember the moment we found out. It was the second time I had ever seen Sanjay cry in my life. And we were in our old townhome. We were sitting at the dining table. Actually, I was sitting. Sanjay was standing right next to me. My phone was on the table on speakerphone. And my fertility doctor said, congrats, you guys. The transfer stuck. You're pregnant. Congratulations. I remember Sanjay wrapping his arms around me, crying. I was crying. We say thank you. And we hang up the phone and we just kind of sit there in shock, in happy shock. And following that news, I remember feeling very familiar signs of pregnancy. God, they sucked, but I was so happy to feel them. That horrible fatigue, food aversions, immediate food aversions, nausea. I hadn't thrown up yet, but I knew that was coming. Until one day, I woke up feeling quite energized and hungry. In that same day, I also had a follow-up ultrasound appointment, but I remember calling Sanjay and being like, isn't that weird? Like I all of a sudden feel well. And both of us kind of talked ourselves out of it. I had a fleeting thought like, oh crap, what if I'm not pregnant anymore? But I pushed it aside because, of course, my brain was protecting me. And I'm like, nah, this happens. It's pregnancy. Anything can happen. So here I was at my follow-up ultrasound appointment. I was in the waiting room and I get a call from my pregnant friend saying that, Flora, I'm in the hospital and I'm admitted. They need to deliver the baby. And I remember telling her, oh my gosh, this was meant to be because I'm in the office right next to the hospital waiting for my ultrasound appointment. After I'm done, I'm immediately coming over. I'm going to be there for you. No questions asked. Not even a hesitation. So I go in for my ultrasound and there was this technician there who I was familiar with. And to the right of me was this blank wall with a TV screen where you could see the projected image of what they were seeing on the ultrasound. I remember looking at the screen and thinking to myself, I don't see anything flickering. I don't see a heart. But then again, I talked myself out of it, being like, okay, you're not an OBGYN. Like, stop it. Maybe this is a weird variant. Who knows? But I do remember looking at the ultrasound technician's face. Her brows were furrowed. She was looking directly at the ultrasound machine screen. She continued to adjust the probe. She would say, take a deep breath and go a little deeper or maneuver it somehow. She wouldn't make eye contact with me. Brows still furrowed. Oh, I can remember this image in my head. And she let out this big sigh, took the ultrasound probe out and said, all right, doc, the OBGYN is waiting for you. Why don't you head on upstairs to her office and she'll explain this ultrasound to you and all the next steps. And I'm like, okay, cool. In my brain, I was like, things are fine. I remember calling Sanjay and being like, hey, where are you? I'm on my way up to the OBGYN's office. Let me know when you're here so you can come right on in. So here I was in my OBGYN's office, who was actually a colleague of mine. Sanjay was standing next to me. I was on the exam table. I was facing the door and she walks in and I recognized her expression. I know that face. That was the same face that I put on as a doctor when I was about to break bad news to a patient. It was a face of not sympathy. I don't feel sorry for them. It was a face of empathy. Like, I know what you're going through. And I'm going to feel your pain with you. And before she said anything, like I knew what she was going to say. I knew she felt bad before delivering this news. I know she felt bad that the pregnancy didn't stick. I knew she felt my pain because she knew I was going through IVF. She knew. I knew. I'm really sorry, Flora. but it looks like the gestational sac was empty. It just basically means that the embryo didn't develop. I'm really sorry this happens sometimes. I know you had multiple IVF transfers. I'm just really sorry that it didn't work out. She held my hand. Her voice wasn't even shaky. It was soft, firm, supportive, definitive. And I don't even remember Sanjay being next to me. I don't even remember him hugging me, his hand on my shoulder. I don't remember anything. I just remember being in a state of shock, denial. I think I actually remember smiling and saying out loud, "That's okay. Miscarriages happen." God, I was devastated. But on this same day that I found out I lost my pregnancy was the same day that my friend needed me. And it was the same day that I marched over to the hospital and I gave my friend a hug and told her everything will be okay. And the same day I lost my pregnancy was the same day she delivered a beautiful baby, healthy, thriving to this day girl. And I really don't know why I put myself through that. Like, I don't know if it was the shock, the denial. I don't know if it was my people pleasing tendencies. Maybe I was just trying to prove to myself that despite the shitty, unfair situation, I still needed to be a good friend, a good wife, mom, doctor, daughter. I needed to be a good everything. I continued to be in this infertility haze until a life-changing moment with Gia. Let me tell you, this infertility process, the egg retrievals, the IVF, it's a second job. You have, at the very minimum, weekly blood draws, ultrasounds, meticulously timed oral, injectable medications that were painful. You're shoving meds up your vagina all throughout the day, mind you. And there were phone calls with updates, there were procedures. And guess what? At any point in time, this entire fucking schedule can change at a drop of a hat. And mind you, during this whole shit show of a situation, I was working as a full-time physician. I was battling a Los Angeles commute. I was trying to figure out how to potty train my toddler. I was balancing my marriage. I was trying to keep up with my husband's schedule, which was just as unpredictable as my IVF schedule. I was on this high. My brain, I think I was high on emotion, grief, sorrow, anger, frustration, envy. I was so different. I felt different. I was different. I don't even recognize that woman. But I trudged forward, thinking that things would get easier. But shit got harder. And I was confused because I was giving it my all. I was chasing this happily ever after. I was waiting for my happily ever after. But at what cost? I was reminded of the cost. One day, I was at home with my then 3-year-old Gia. We were playing together. We were in our living room. And we were playing with some electronic toy. And she was just being so stinking cute. I love the toddler stages. I think it's my favorite. And I remember looking at her and she was just so stinking cute. And I remember saying, "Aw, Gigi, give mommy a hug." And she, without even looking at me, she said, "Oh no, you're sick, mommy. I can't give you a hug because you have way too many ouchies." And she just kept playing. And I remember sitting there next to her, dumbfounded. It stopped me in my tracks. And I got tearful because to this innocent 3-year-old who had no idea what I was going through, I was known as sick mommy. I had been poked, prodded, bruised, filled with scar tissue, filled with so many negative emotions of unhappiness, all to chase happiness, or what I thought was happiness, eternal happiness. I was to a point where my daughter was scared to hug me. That moment right there, that was my turning point. I told myself, Flora, you got to change. Right now, life is handing you this shit show of a situation, but you're letting your daughter slip away. And one day she's going to be older and she's going to continue to see you as sick mommy, as someone that was unhappy, was depressed, was anxious, was leading her life with anger and resentment and guilt and shame and envy. And that is who she was going to learn from. I cannot let that happen. It is my responsibility to get out of this fog. It is my responsibility that no matter what situation was handed by destiny, it's my responsibility to take control. It's my responsibility to be happy. And it's time. It's time to be happy with your daughter, with your husband, with your job, your home, with all of your achievements that you've worked so hard for. It's time to be happy with the people who love you, who cherish you, who are grateful for you. So, what are you waiting for? And that's where this all started. That's when I started to change my own mindset. That's when I took control of my happiness. Part 2, coming out soon. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you so much for joining and spending your precious time here with me. As someone who prioritizes her energy, I am so grateful that you chose to spend yours here. To help me help you, please take an extra 30 seconds of your time to rate and review the podcast on your listening platform. For more tips and a behind-the-scenes look into my life, follow me on Instagram at Dr. Flora Sinha. That's Dr. Flora Sinha. Finally, connecting with you truly fills my cup. So DM me on Instagram, email me at florasinhamd@gmail.com, repost if you love this episode. I love hearing from you. I am so grateful for you and cannot wait to be back for the next episode. Bye.